Hi, this is Mitchell, and this video is about the importance and the power of post-processing. Or rather, it's about the importance and the power of post-processing with a purpose and with knowledge. Here I've got 7 of my photographs, and I consider them to be pretty good photographs. However, these are images that come directly out of the camera, so they're raw files. And if you have a look at them, you'll probably agree that they're not the best presentation of this work. You see that they're rather dull and flat, so I'm really not making the most out of the work that I've put in to capture these images. I'm really not presenting them in the best way, and I think that, to a large extent, that's what post-processing is, presenting your work to an audience in the best possible way. So what I mean by presenting the work in the best way possible is getting the image on the computer screen or on paper to look as close as possible to the image that my eye and my mind saw. In some cases, we can make the photographs look the part with just a few global adjustments, and global adjustments are those adjustments that are applied to the entire photograph. So in these cases, within 30 seconds to a minute, we can essentially transform an okay image to a good one, a good image to a great one, and a great image to a powerful and unforgettable image. In other cases, the photographs might require what's called local adjustments, and those are adjustments which are applied only to a certain area within the photograph. Once we start getting into local adjustments, completing the work on an image can take from anywhere from a bit over 1 minute to, I know that I've certainly spent way too long on certain photographs, but let's just say that easily you can get into 15 minutes or even more than that. In this video, we'll have a very quick look at how to post-process our images effectively. I'll show you how I do it, and I'll introduce you to some of my techniques. With the photographs that don't require too much adjustments, I'll take you through my process step by step in real time. While with the other images that require a bit more work, I'll actually deconstruct them, meaning that I'll bring up an image that's already been worked on, and then I'll show and explain everything that I've done to it without actually having to do it in real time. Let's begin with this photograph right here. It is a rather easy and quick one. Again, as I mentioned, most of these images look somewhat dull. So one of the main aims through all of them will be trying to make them more dynamic and more punchy. The first thing that I generally do to achieve this is go all the way down here, camera calibration and profile. Now, a quick warning, not all cameras will have this. For example, I'm shooting with a Fuji now and I don't have anything here, but camera manufacturers such as Canon and Nikon and some of the other major ones, they definitely include a few profiles right here. So what I'm actually going to do is, I've already played around with this before. Every one of them gives the image a slightly different look to start off with. You can see camera neutral, camera landscape. They all make the image look a little bit more distinct. I've already played around with this, and I'm going to choose camera faithful. There's no particular rule to what to choose. It's really about what goes with your taste, and this is just what I think works for me. Next, I'm going to go back up here, and these are the important global adjustments. The contrast slider. This is the slider that can really make your image look dynamic and punchy. So I'm going to raise the value of this slider all the way up to, let's say, plus 48. Next, you see right there, I noticed that there's a bit of a hill showing up right around there. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to try to bring it back out a little bit so it's a little bit more visible. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring down the value of the highlights to about here, minus 43. There are no particular rules. Again, it's just about what looks right to you. I will note that it is rather important to have your monitor calibrated if you want your results to look consistent across different monitors. And you can see that already there's quite a noticeable difference. Before, after. What I'm going to do next is I want a little bit more depth in my blacks. So I'm going to actually bring this slider just a tiny bit like this, and then I'm going to adjust the clarity, and the clarity basically increases the contrast in your midtones. And what that does, it just makes the image pop that little bit more. So I'm going to raise the clarity all the way up to about plus 37. And there you go. I've essentially transformed the image from this to this. This is the quickest way to work on this particular image. It's not necessarily the very best. You could spend a bit more time on it, but considering that this image is not particularly a masterpiece, I think that I've already done it some justice with just these quick global adjustments. So once again, before, after, before, after. Here's another pretty easy and pretty quick one. So again, I'm going to go down here and I'm not going to play around with these and look at what every one of these makes the image look like. I already played around with it, so I'm going to choose camera portrait. That's what I liked. And I'm going to go back up here. I'm going to increase the contrast to just about here. And I'm going to increase the clarity to just about here. You can see now the image has a lot more pop to it. But I feel that perhaps it's looking a tiny bit too dark. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to bring some detail back to the shadows, and I'm going to increase this slider right here to about plus 23. I'm almost done, but there's something that just bothers me just a tiny bit, and that's that this part here, it's virtually white. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to go to the tone curve, and I'm going to move this little slider for the highlights right here, and then I'm going to decrease the value in the highlights, and you see that that sort of makes the water just a tiny bit less white. It just looks a bit more acceptable to me. Again, let's have a look at the before and after. Before and after. I'd say that for about 30 seconds of adjustments, that's a pretty significant difference. Here, things are getting a little bit more complex. You could say that I've underexposed this photograph because this man's face is really too dark. And that's kind of true, but this was a very conscious decision. I knew that if I were to expose for his face and to make it look sufficiently bright, I'd end up with a very blown out white blotch of a cloud right here, and I didn't want that. Lightroom's highlights and shadows feature is great for bringing out the detail in areas which are a little bit too bright or too dark, as long as you have enough information, enough data in there. So I didn't underexpose the face so much that I can't bring the detail back to it. And so that's what I'm going to look to do. As soon as, again, I adjust the profile right here. This was shot in the Himalayas and the sky is quite blue around there. And I know that the landscape profile, camera landscape, will give me a pretty blue sky. So that's the starting point that I want to have. Now that the sky is bluer, I'm going to go right back up here and I'm going to adjust the shadow slider in order to bring out the detail in the man's face. So shadows will go all the way up to about plus 71. And you see that the image already looks completely different. To prove that, let me just show you the before and the after. Since I've got this highlight slider, I might actually move it a little bit to the left in order to bring a tiny bit more detail to the brighter parts of the cloud. So let me zoom in to show you the difference. So this is before the adjustment and this is after. It's very tiny, but it does make a difference. What we're going to do next is a local adjustment, and I'm going to apply this local adjustment right here to the man's face. I'm pretty happy with how it looks. It's sufficiently bright, but I'd like it to pop just a tiny bit more. In Lightroom 5, they have a great tool called the radial filter. And that's exactly what I'm going to use. Shift M is the shortcut for it. I'm just going to click it and I'm going to draw an oval right over this man's face and just position it like this. Note that I've clicked this right here, invert mask. It means that whatever effect I'm going to apply is going to be applied inside of this oval and not outside it. So it's pretty important to tick invert mask. Now that I've got invert mask on, I'm going to adjust the value in the clarity. And I'm going to bring it up, not a whole lot, but let's just say to about here. I'm also going to bring up the value of the exposure just a little. And again, let me show you the difference. This is before I applied the radial filter, and this is after. Before and after. It's not a huge difference here, but if I were to print this as a large image, I'd certainly be happy with this little change. Now I'm going to zoom out and I'm just going to apply another local adjustment right around this area here. For this, I'm going to use the adjustment brush, shortcut K on the keyboard, and I'm going to increase the value of the clarity slider right here, and I'm going to paint over this mud. The reason why I'm doing that is that I want the mud to really stand out, to look almost as if I can reach out and touch it. And bringing up the value in the clarity slider or the contrast in the midtones, which is what it does, seems to achieve that effect more or less. It's not a huge difference, but definitely a noticeable one. I'm going to exit the adjustment brush and show you that transformation, the before and the after. Before and after. It's a little bit more complex than the first couple of images, but it's still not a huge job. Again, you can see just how quickly you can transform a photograph when you know what you're doing. This is another example of a photo that looks pretty flat, and what we're going to want to do with it is, again, make it a little bit more dynamic and punchy. I want the girl's face to pop a little bit out of the frame, and I want her hands in particular to pop as well. So once again, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go to Profile. I already know that I want camera standard. I'm going to go back up here and I'm going to increase the contrast to right about there. And then I'm actually going to this slider right here, which is the white slider, and I'm going to increase the value of the white slider. What this does is just gives the image a little bit more luminance overall, and I like that in this case. It gives a bit more separation from the child's body and the background right there. It just brings her out from the background nicely. I'm actually going to increase the clarity around the face and around the hands. You might ask me, why not just increase the clarity for the whole image? Oh, that'll make things pop, right? And I am going to try that. I'm going to show you what happens. I brought up the clarity, not a whole lot, but enough to see some difference. And the problem here is that I've applied the effect to the entire image. So essentially that kind of makes everything pop. It makes the background pop as well, and it makes, you know, all of these parts all around the frame pop. And I don't want that. I only really want the face and the hands to pop out from the rest of the image. And it's that sort of difference which is responsible for things to really pop out. So I'm going to undo the effect, and I'm going to enter the radial filter again. I'm just going to reset it. I'm going to draw an oval right over the girl's face. I will actually increase the exposure slightly, just to brighten her face a little bit. I'm going to increase the clarity to the same amount that I was increasing it before. And you can see that now it's really just the face which is popping out from the rest of the frame. I'm going to hide the effect and bring it back. And I'm going to do exactly the same thing to the girl's hands. I'm going to increase the clarity a little bit more in this case because I want the hands to pop out a little bit more. Again, the effect switched off and the effect applied. The last thing that I'll do here is just brighten her eyes a little bit, and it's very easy to overdo this effect. So I'm going to take extra care not to go overboard. I'm going to enter the adjustment brush, K on the keyboard, and I'm going to bring the exposure up to about 0.30. I'm going to paint right here and right here. And perhaps, you know, you can play around with this. You see that's really way too bright, just to show you what can happen. And some people actually do this. They really go crazy brightening the eyes. I think I'm going to leave it at about 0.40. And just to see the difference, I'm going to switch off the effect and I'm going to switch it back on. So I think it's very subtle, and that's quite okay with me. I'd rather subtle and sort of realistic looking than something over the top and overboard. Exit the adjustment brush, zoom out, and let's have a look at the before and after. Before and after. Again, these are pretty quick adjustments. So really within about a minute or maximum 2, if I hadn't slowed down to explain everything, I would have transformed this photograph quite significantly. That's it for part 1 of the video. If you've enjoyed this video and have learned something from it, you'll most definitely love Eyevoyage's newest learning tool, Understanding Post-Processing. You get 10 raw images and 10 video tutorials with plenty of explanations, techniques, and additional examples. I believe it's the absolute most powerful and practical way to learn. You follow along with what I do on the screen and try everything out for yourself. The release date is almost here, April 16th. So check your inbox then. Thanks for watching.